Caleb and Violet rendezvoused at a gathering hosted by their common acquaintances. In the course of the evening, they engaged in meaningful conversations, discovering numerous shared passions, and deep down, they felt an inkling of something auspicious. Perchance their encounter was ordained by the hand of destiny. Their bond progressed swiftly, and within a couple of months, Caleb invited Violet to reside in his abode. He had recently made the decision to secure a mortgage, and his income thankfully facilitated such a venture. After 6 more months of harmonious cohabitation, the duo exchanged vows, formally solidifying their union. Violet, unlike most others with a typical 9-to-5 occupation, did not work, but she harbored a fervor for sewing ever since her childhood. Prior to her nuptials, she possessed an antiquated sewing machine, but after tying the knot, her caring spouse purchased all the necessary accoutrements, including a dress form and assorted equipment, even arranging a designated space in their home for her entrepreneurial endeavors. Initially, Violet created garments solely for herself and a select few friends. However, thanks to glowing recommendations, word of her exceptional talent spread like wildfire, attracting a steady stream of new patrons. And thus, a modest enterprise was born. As Caleb departed for his office in the early hours of the day, his beloved wife would arise closer to 10 o'clock, leisurely commencing her work. Whether inundated with orders or experiencing a lull, Violet relished the opportunity to devise fresh ensembles for herself. On occasion, when her husband would inquire during their evening repast about her day's activities, it would transpire that she hadn't ventured outside the confines of their home the entire time. Originally, Caleb felt a pang of worry about his wife's penchant for isolation, but gradually he found a soothing comfort in it. It was unlikely that she'd have a need for gratuitous adventures. She'd never aroused jealousy in her husband. There simply wasn't a need for it. He found her completely relatable, a commonplace craftswoman who chose to dodge unnecessary strain, and at times, limit her communication with the outside world, finding solace within the confines of her home and her crafts. However, human judgment is fundamentally susceptible to mistakes, and Caleb was yet to encounter that through his personal experiences. One workday, during lunch, Caleb and his colleagues headed towards the eatery situated on the ground floor. This was somewhere they frequented almost daily, interspersed with occasional visits to the cafe in the adjacent building for a change of scene. With his observant eyes sharp beneath his furrowed brows, he started scrutinizing the displayed items, selecting his meal. Why does he have such a long face? Isaac, his colleague, who happened to be in the same department, asked him. It seems that everything is a bit gloomy today. I can't say for sure. I guess my wife spoiled me with her homemade dishes. Her cooking is just out of this world, Caleb replied, and a gentle smile played on his lips as he thought of his wife. And how does she do it? His colleague joked. She doesn't leave the house, and she has enough time to do housework. Damn it, you almost have to take her out for a walk. She's a real hermit, the husband replied. Isaac suddenly stopped talking and looked at Caleb questioningly. And are you absolutely positive? I think I spotted Violet just the other day at a restaurant while I was out, he remarked. Caleb confidently reassured him, stating that it was highly unlikely, as he always knew his wife's whereabouts. Isaac didn't engage in any argument or attempt to prove anything. Instead, he quickly changed the topic of conversation, effortlessly redirecting their attention and promptly forgetting about the situation. Caleb remained silent throughout the entire lunch, his thoughts consumed by his own concerns. While he had initially dismissed Isaac's words, he had started to harbor doubts. He couldn't help but question whether he truly knew his wife, as well as he thought. What if she was hiding something and withholding information from him? Caleb began to observe his beloved's every word and movement with increased vigilance. Surprisingly, he began to notice that Violet would spend an unusually long time working on a single product. Despite her claims of being at home all day diligently working, something seemed amiss. You won't get satisfactory results if you just pretend to iron the dress, lamented the mannequin stationed at the ironing board, as if its efforts were futile. One evening during dinner, he casually inquired about her business and how things were progressing. She started talking about the multitude of recent orders, remarking, "It feels like I'm stuck in a rut," and chuckled. It seemed that Violet had grown accustomed to her husband, never asking about the process, never bothering to notice how much time she spent working. It was becoming apparent that someone here was being deceitful. For 7 days, Caleb trod through his days as though submerged beneath an icy lake. Doubts burrowed further into his mind, cementing the unsettling notion that clandestine activities were unfolding beyond his sight. His attempt to sift through his wife's phone communications bore no revelations, leaving him puzzled about how to untangle the knot of suspicion. Midweek, with his anxiety sharpened to a fine point, he impulsively decided to make an unannounced return to his domicile. During his lunch break, a deviation from his usual routine driven by an instinct he couldn't ignore. Upon arrival, he discovered his wife's absence from the house. "Well, now this just got interesting," he mused, feigning the monotony of another afternoon at the desk. Caleb dialed her number to casually inquire about her day and her activities. With a weary exhale, Violet recounted her strenuous endeavor with a complex blouse that had consumed her morning, claiming she had now reclined on the couch to recuperate. The silence that enveloped her words suggested the tranquility of a residence, albeit not their own. This much was starkly evident to him. His jaw clenched tightly, straining the muscles of his face as he proposed a spontaneous visit. "Why don't I swing by now?" His tone light, hinting at last night's savory soup. Lost in thought, Violet tried to find an excuse, but it eluded her. "Of course, my love," she murmured. "Then I'll see you soon." Satisfied, Caleb ended the call and eased into an armchair in the solitary living room, waiting to confront whatever truths might unfold. He folded his arms across his chest, took in a deep breath, and slowly exhaled. "Well, let's see how she handles it," he muttered to himself. 15 minutes later, Violet rushed into the apartment. Her hair was messily pulled back into a haphazard ponytail, and she was clutching some sort of bag. "I thought I'd squeeze in a quick errand for you and dash to the store," she began right at the threshold. "Have you been waiting long?" She pressed on, but noticing her husband's lack of response, she added after a pause, "Been waiting long since I called you." Caleb responded with a drawn-out, "Barely." "Are you busy, Violet?" "That call. You were coming straight from work, weren't you?" She seemed to be slowly grasping the bleakness of the situation. "And where exactly were you driving from? Will you tell me?" Caleb asked sarcastically, his gaze drilling into her. The woman looked flustered, her words fumbling, producing only a jumble of incoherency. "Do I know him?" Caleb asked in a stern tone. "No," Violet whispered, but even that struck harder, the realization that his wife was unfaithful with a stranger, hitting him like a ton of bricks. So many stories swam before his eyes. By nightfall, Violet and all her belongings were thrown outside. Caleb didn't let her take the sewing machine he had bought for her. Let her earn the money for it herself now, he declared with satisfaction. And Caleb would have sold everything she owned as a form of moral retribution. The couple went their separate ways, parting ways through divorce. Violet, left with limited funds, resorted to renting a cramped room in a shared apartment. Financial constraints curtailed her options, leaving her with no alternative. As time passed, Caleb discovered the intricate details of the scandal through trusted acquaintances. It transpired that Violet had engaged in an extramarital affair with the spouse of one of her clients. During a visit for measurements and discussions about custom tailoring, her paramour accompanied her as a supposed chaperone. Whether their rendezvous originated from his initiative or she stumbled upon him on social media remained inconsequential. The affair burgeoned, entangling Violet in a web of deceit as she betrayed her own husband, while her lover betrayed his own wife. Yet, as always, secrets eventually emerge, rendering futile the hopes that these two adulterers fostered. In due course, news of their transgressions reached the ears of the client herself, triggering an irrevocable disaster. The client, wielding significant influence, wasted no time spreading word about Violet's infidelity and poor workmanship, casting a shadow of doubt over her abilities. Consequently, the once flourishing stream of clients dwindled to a mere trickle, leaving Violet bereft of external patronage and numerous pending orders. Women desiring to preserve their own familial sanctity wanted nothing to do with a woman capable of destroying homes. In such dire straits, Violet found herself in an unenviable predicament: a rented abode, no means of employment, and even her lover's abrupt cessation of contact. She had it all, only to witness it crumble under the weight of her illicit passion, eroding everything she once held dear.